Hi, I'm Judy Morano. Welcome to the show. Today we have with us Justin Goodhart. Hi.
Hi, Judy.
How are you?
Good.
Good. Justin has shown at the studio before, but he's just got some fantastic stuff that I want to talk about today. So before we talk about your work, let's talk about you.
Sure.
What is your education in art? Were you an artist growing
So
up?
I have no formal art
I love
education. My college degree is in philosophy.
Very useful.
Extremely useful. But I mean, I've been interested in art most of my life, and I took art classes in high school, and I took some art classes in college. But I mean, nothing that I would consider really formal, more as a pastime. So.
Okay. Do you draw as well as take photos?
Very, very poorly.
Okay.
So, I mean, and I used to try to paint, and I know I'm not that good at it.
Okay.
I still enjoy it a little bit, but I'm just not really good at it. I mean, photography is really what I ended up taking to.
Okay.
You know, much more and really seriously about 5 or 6 years ago.
I was going to say, when did you start?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always had a camera. I mean, since I was probably 8 or 10 years old, I had a little, you know, point and click film camera when I was a kid, but I really took to it much more, you know, about 5 or 6 years ago, and when I got serious about it, my first professional-ish digital camera.
What was your first time you showed your work? Like, what was your first professional job?
I mean, I guess I would say it's probably about 2.5 years ago now. Was the first time I had a piece in the gallery at Front Street Gallery.
Okay.
In Patterson. So that would be my first, I guess, kind of, I'd say, real formal.
And did it
official
sell?
show. It did not sell.
It did not.
It's still for sale.
Okay.
So.
And what was it a picture of?
It's a photograph in the Great Swamp that I took at sunset. So one of my favorite places to go.
We're going to talk about that. So I was on your website today, and I've been looking at all your work, and I noticed they're so different.
Yeah.
You go from landscape nature to very urban cutting edge to this night stuff.
Yeah.
Is that a progression? Have you moved through them, or do you still do all three of them?
I mean, I definitely still do all three of those things. I definitely started mostly with more traditional landscape photography was really what I kind of first delved into. The nighttime stuff came a little bit later, you know, like this, and certainly the cityscapes about 2.5 years ago or so now that I really started doing that more. I think they're actually very closely related in many ways. Some of the process and the way that I look at it, I think, and some of the composition is very similar. Obviously, the way that I have to execute the photograph is different.
Right,
but I see a pretty close connection to those two.
What's the process? Like, how in your brain, what happens?
That's a really hard thing to say. I mean, you know, obviously, it's a lot for me. A lot of it's framing. You know, I'm trying to frame a photograph in an interesting way. Some of it's trying to make sure in a certain way that it looks natural and normal, but I think also in a certain way that it's not quite normal. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense.
That makes perfect sense.
So kind of, it looks welcoming, and it looks like, okay, I'm familiar with that, but then the more you look at it, it may make you feel maybe a little uncomfortable, or make you feel a little bit more intrigued than if it was just kind of maybe straight up, that's exactly the way it is.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a good explanation.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm thinking of one of the pictures that I was looking at, and it
Yeah.
happens to be one of my favorites. Is
Yeah.
the cityscape with the windows.
Yeah.
And they're all different colors.
Yes.
And you look at it, I can stare at it forever because
Yeah.
it just has that appeal to it.
Yeah, I love that. I actually love that photograph myself. And as you look at the windows, there's different things going on in each one, which I find really interesting.
And you were walking down the street and you saw this and you said, "I want that picture," or?
I was actually on a rooftop in Manhattan, photographing the other direction, about 90 degrees to that. It was right around sunset, and realized that this building next to us, that the windows and the sunset and the different color lights that you get from the city were just doing amazing things. And you know, had to change my lenses really quickly, change my setup, and zoom in tight to some of those windows and try to capture that. So. So sometimes just, you know, that wasn't, I wouldn't say necessarily planned, at least not originally, you know, once I saw it, then I had an idea of the vision that, you know, what I want it to look like kind of in the end, but it was just kind of, you know, keeping an open mind to what's around you.
And do you carry your camera with you when you're not working? I mean, when you're on your own, like out weekends and stuff?
I try to keep my camera with me a lot of times.
You just never know what's going to strike you.
Luckily, I have an iPhone. And that takes actually pretty good pictures.
Please don't tell me you take pictures with your iPhone. And
I do take pictures with my iPhone, but I do treat them differently. I mean, I think it does actually take great photographs, and you can print them. I don't usually do it from what I'll call my professional work. There's people who do,
No,
and
I
are
know.
very successful at it,
Oh, I know,
and,
yeah.
and there's some benefits to it, I think. So, if I'm, just hanging out with friends and just doing random things, a lot of times it is iPhone pictures, because carrying my camera is pretty heavy. But I try to, if I think I'm going to be in a place that might be interesting, I like to have my camera with me. I may not take any pictures that day. It's definitely possible. Or I might upset my wife by taking way too many pictures and taking too long. So.
Okay. And so you'll just walk around and, like, if you're out in nature, you'll see something, you'll take a picture.
Yeah.
You'll decide if you like it. I mean, let's say you take 20 pictures. Out of those 20 shots, how many do you usually keep?
Out of 20, if I kept 2, I'm happy.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and I think, and I've forced myself to be more selective over time. And I have forced myself to actually delete things over time. I used to be really bad at just like keeping everything like, oh, I may never know. And you have 155 pictures that I took that night of basically the same exact thing. When 2 or 3 of them were probably good enough to
Probably
keep.
you should have stopped. And
Right,
yeah.
But I mean, because a lot of times I'm taking a photograph, I'm looking at it, which is the nice thing with digital, is you can kind of get some instant feedback.
Right.
And start to look at the things, okay, okay, I got that kind of how I wanted it, but this part of it's not quite right. So I am taking, sometimes I am taking that, essentially the same photograph many times to get to what I want.
Gotcha.
So.
I want to talk a little bit about this night stuff, because
Sure.
I just think it's super cool.
Yeah.
What made you go into this sort of genre?
It actually has to do very closely with this place right here, which is on Bannerman's Island near Beacon. Probably about 3 years ago, I was on a regular tourist boat tour going to Bannerman's Island during the day, like most people do. And the tour guide was talking about an upcoming night photography class that they were holding on the island with a couple night photographers. And I said, wow, that sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And so we started to chat a little bit, and the second I got off the boat, I emailed to get signed up on it. So I've been to Bannerman's now 3 times in a row. They do it once a year. They do this special night photography class and clinic. And so I mean, it was really, that's probably the most formal training I've ever had. Is been on that island.
So tell me how it works. How does this picture come to be?
So this one specifically is quite a piece of work. It's not. In a way, it's kind of hard. In a way, it's not too complicated once you get used to how it would work out. It did in a way. I like to say it took me 3 years to get there, because I mean this is one of from my most recent trip, and it was kind of something that I had kind of wanted to do the first time, and I just didn't have the skills and the knowledge. I was fumbling around in the dark for the first time. The second time I got a little bit closer, and the third time I kind of seemed to like it all kind of worked out
together.
for me.
Yeah.
The weather cooperated, the light cooperated. So this is about an hour and 20 minutes of exposure.
Wow.
So in that sense, it's not easy, because it obviously takes a really long time to take that photograph.
And you're not holding the camera, I assume.
I'm not holding the camera. So the vast majority of my photographs are taken off a tripod.
Okay.
So almost all of them are. So it's a very, very long exposure. So there's a lot of kind of test shots that I'll take to figure out, because obviously I want to make sure I get the composition right of what I want.
Right.
Because I'm basically going to take one of these.
Because it's an all-night process.
Pretty much, right. So when I do a long photograph like this, it's usually the last picture I take of the night. I've taken other shorter exposures throughout the night.
So what is the length? How does the length change what happens in the picture?
So the big thing that I'm going for with those really long exposures is the movement of the stars. So which is actually really, it's our movement of the Earth spinning in relation to the stars. So one part of in this image, what I was looking for was also that those strong circles around a certain point, which is always going to be the North Star. So because that is our access point, the Earth is spinning on that axis, pointing at the North Star. So using actually an app on my iPhone, I can find out exactly where the North Star was. I could set my composition to put that North Star right above the building, kind of the way I wanted it to be. And then the longer that exposure gets, the longer these lines become. And
it always has that circular sort of feel to it.
Correct. If you're facing north. So as you turn towards the equator, because of the curvature of the Earth, what's towards the north is going to kind of curve one way, towards the south is kind of curving the other way. You can get these kind of cool divergent lines.
Oh.
If you actually have the actual like east-west axis in it. If you more and more further south, you get like they're kind of curving the other way, but they'll never quite make a circle either. They'll get really, really long and it can go almost straightish, kind of. So,
Okay. Wow.
So that's what the main reason why I would be going for that long of an exposure.
Okay.
Also, by doing a really long exposure like that, I'm shooting at a very low ISO. So I'm shooting at ISO 100, the base ISO for my camera, which also allows the image to be very clean and
I was
free
saying,
of
where's all
noise.
this light coming from in the back, though?
That's light pollution.
Is it?
So that's looking towards Newburgh and Beacon.
Uh-huh.
So this would be looking basically due north from the island. So that's where that is really coming from. So that's mostly light pollution off the horizon.
And how dark was it when you took this?
This night, it was not super, super dark. It was about 30% moonlight that night. So the moon rose really late. So early in the night, I was taking pictures where if I was going to photograph the residence there, I'd have to add light probably with a flashlight if I wanted any kind of detail.
Okay.
The moon rose somewhere around 1:30 in the morning, and there was a small moon, but enough to illuminate this so there's no added light except for the obvious flashlight coming through there. That's added. So that's all natural light just from the moonlight. So, so if you get too much moonlight, if it's like a full moon, you start to lose the stars. So it's kind of a balance between those two things.
I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
I think it's amazing. I've never seen anything like this. Now, there are a lot of people who do this. That was...
I don't think there's a lot. I mean, there's a pretty strong community of night photographers. And there's a pretty wide range of things that people do within night photography. There's a lot of night photographers who like this style of photographs. There's a lot of night photographers who don't like this style of night photographs. They don't like that movement. They like a more, immediate, where the stars are still like little dots, little points in the sky. I like to do a little bit of both.
Okay.
I think I like this. There's this passage of time that's really interesting to me. And I think it adds kind of this, and a little bit of a surreal kind of feel to it. That I like.
Like you took a paintbrush and went whoosh.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So. Now, is this more of what you're doing now? Do you find yourself doing more of these night shots now? Are you still, excuse me, are you still doing the landscapes? Are you still doing the nature photos?
Yeah, I'm still doing a lot of those. I mean, the nighttime ones, they take a little bit more planning. And they're very weather dependent. They're very dependent upon the moonlight and those kinds of things. They're time consuming.
Okay.
And you have to be up really late. So I don't do it a ton. But I do try to plan a certain number of times for myself to do those kinds of things.
And do you travel to take photography?
I do.
You do?
I do. I'm actually leaving in a couple days for a trip to Wyoming. So.
Really? What do you have in mind in Wyoming?
So we're going to Jackson Hole and Yellowstone. So definitely.
Specifically to take pictures?
It's a little bit just a sightseeing and a hiking trip, but for me, a lot of it's going to be
a lot of it's going to be pictures. Oh, they're going to be beautiful.
Yeah, I was there about 7 years ago, right before I was kind of really getting more into photography more seriously. So I'm pretty excited to go back.
That sounds awesome.
And especially go out there at night, because I didn't go out at night then at all. So
you're definitely going to do some night stuff.
I'm definitely going out at night.
You're definitely going out at night.
Yes, absolutely.
That's going to be this, and if there's less light pollution, that's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, when you get out into the western U.S., where there's a lot less light pollution, the sky becomes so much more brilliant. I tend to do a little bit less of this kind of stuff there, because you can photograph the Milky Way, and there's so many more stars to photograph. With the long exposure with that, you lose some of that sense.
So we're going to have another art show with you, just so I can see all this stuff that's coming out of the West.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm really excited for it. So
now, if you could go anywhere to travel anywhere to film something, where would you want to be?
That's a really hard question. So,
get that dream shot in mind.
I don't know if I have that dream shot really that I can think of. I mean, one of our kind of bucket list trips is to go to the Galapagos. So that's a big one.
Can I come?
No. It's going to be an anniversary trip.
Oh, okay.
So,
no, then I don't.
So we're actually in the process of planning it already, but it's a little ways off. So, but yeah, I mean, I would like to do that. I mean, I'd love to see the Northern Lights. I guess if I can think of a purely photographic thing, especially like a night photograph that I would love to take, would be
the Northern Lights.
Going to Iceland or Lapland and seeing the Northern Lights and getting some of those photographs.
That's like a short plane trip away lately.
Yeah.
People do that for weekends.
Yeah. One of the gentlemen who I learned night photography from, he leads a couple trips a year. up that way. And
cool.
every time I see his pictures, I'm very, very jealous. So,
That would be cool.
yeah.
Now I know that you are a member of Frogs.
Yes.
Frogs are, for those who don't know what Frogs is.
Friends of the Great Swamp.
There you go. Friends of the Great Swamp. And a lot of your pictures come from the Great Swamp.
Yes.
How long have you been with Frogs?
I've been on the Frogs board for about a year.
Okay.
So I'm pretty new with them on a board level. I mean, I've done activities with them, and I've done some photography with them for the last several years. But
You
I'm
do some
pretty new.
educational stuff out on the swamp, don't you?
Frogs does a lot of different educational events, paddling, hiking, lectures, all kinds of stuff that we do. I help lead a few times a year various more photographic excursions. So I recently did one that was on the water paddling. I've done some with hiking and some other things that we've done within the Great Swamp. So I don't come from the science background that a lot of our other board members come from that are really great. I mean, a lot of them are scientists and educators and
yeah. So what
former
drew you
college
to that?
professors.
What drew you to that?
I mean, the Great Swamp itself is extremely beautiful.
It really is.
Which
Yes.
a lot of people I think are really surprised that they think of a swamp as this dirty, nasty.
Right. I've
not
been on it
very
many
great
times on my
place.
kayak, and I can't
Yeah.
even believe I'm in Putnam County.
Yeah, and it changes so quickly. I mean, in just the course of a few minutes paddle, it's very different feels and very different environments. So I mean, from a purely nature-loving perspective, it's great. From a photographic perspective, it's great. So I mean, that's how I really got involved. Was just I got familiar with Frogs through some connections through some photography that I had done there, and then and I kind of am drawn to ecological and environmental organizations. So it was a really nice fit.
Yeah.
So the biggest project recently was the relaunch of our website. So
Which sounds so uncreative and so unenvironmental, but okay.
Yeah, but that was my fun project for the last almost year. Actually, that was.
Well, they do a lot of great stuff, though. They really do.
So that's been my big work I've been doing with Frogs in the last year or so. Was a complete redesign and a relaunch of our website, which just happened.
And do you have any events coming up soon that you could tell us about?
For me personally, or for Frogs?
Either.
So, me personally, no. I don't have anything really much coming up quite on the books yet. So, with Frogs, Friends of the Great Swamp, we do have several things coming up. We do actually have a photographic hike coming up this weekend with Lana Kelly. She's also a great photographer. She's leading a hike in Pauling along the Appalachian Trail where it goes to the Great Swamp.
Nice.
We have some family paddles and some other paddles coming up. Our website is frogs-ny.org. Okay. They can go on there, and we have all the events listed there, or on our Facebook page. They're all on there as well. So
that's great. And I know the other, I think, if I remember correctly, Habitat for Humanity is another one of your.
Habitat for Humanity is an organization that I have been involved with a lot over the years. I started as a volunteer on site right after moving to Putnam County about 7 years ago. They happened to be building pretty close to my neighborhood, so I got involved right then. I did serve on their board for several years, and now I'm back to being a volunteer again with them.
Well, you do a lot of good things.
I try to stay busy. So.
Okay, so when you're not taking photography, taking classes, taking pictures, volunteering or working for a living, what else do you do? What do you do in your spare time?
What do I have time for?
I don't know. There's 24 hours in a day. You've got to have time for something.
I mean, a lot that, obviously all those things kind of take up a lot of my time. A lot of my personal time and things that I want to do is a lot of times tied to photography, of course. I plan we plan a lot of our vacations and a lot of our, or even day trips kind of around that. I mean, we like to do other things with it. My wife and I like to eat quite a bit, so we do like going to nice restaurants.
Do you take pictures of food?
I don't take many pictures of food.
Okay. 'Cause I know people who do that. Like they take pictures of their food because it's pretty.
Yeah, I mean, I do take pictures of my food. It's true.
With your iPhone.
If you go to my Instagram account, you probably see some. I'm not great at it, so.
Okay.
And it's certainly not from a professional standpoint. So, I'm thinking about changing that though.
Yeah.
So. It's one of the next things I'm looking at.
Really?
Learning about, so yeah.
Food pictures?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, we'll see. I'm always interested in learning new things, so I started taking portraits recently. I had not photographed people really at all, except for candidly, until less than a year ago.
Really? And there were some portraits on your website?
Yes, there's a few up there, so Yeah, mostly friends of mine that, you know, or people that I know that have made pose for me.
Guinea pigs, you
But
call
that's
them.
right. So, I'm also involved a little bit with Arts on the Lake, and we have a photography group there. It's led by Chris Cassabury, who's a spectacular portrait photographer.
Amazing photographer.
So getting to know him and getting involved with that group really kind of sparked a new interest for me, something that I never thought I was interested in.
Are they all very different techniques? I mean, when you look at people versus, is there a lot to know?
Yeah, it's quite different. I mean, especially if you're coming from landscape and long exposure, you got lots of time, right? You know, you can really set things up. For people, I like, for me, you want to capture like a moment
in time
that doesn't look set up, that doesn't look posed, something really kind of natural.
Right.
And that's a very different experience.
That's in itself an art form, finding that moment.
Yeah, and it's also taking a lot of pictures. So, but I've really been learning about lighting. And that's the big thing with a lot of portrait photography is really much more lighting. So most landscape you're not adding, you're just using the light that you have.
Right.
Night photography, I use a little bit of light at times.
Now, do you take classes yourself? I mean, how do you learn this stuff?
So some of it I've been learning a lot through Arts on the Lake. So every other month we get together and photograph. So we meet every month. Every other month we photograph, the other months we show work and discuss.
Okay.
So it's really through that experience of shooting with
people. It's learning from other artists.
Other people, right. So, and then when I get interested in something, I have a personality that wants to try to delve pretty deep into it. So I start buying equipment and I start reading books and I start, watching YouTube videos and doing all those kinds of things.
Well, you're a normal person then.
Yeah.
Do what everyone else does.
Right. So
you can Google it.
Yeah, exactly. So and you probably get some good advice that way and some probably really bad advice that way. So it's really been. I've really, definitely had some guidance from some people that I am lucky enough to know.
Okay.
But really, it's been some exploration and trial and error.
Trial and error, and the worst that happens is you delete it. I mean, it's not horrible.
Unless you're being paid to take the photographs.
Right.
Then that's a little more. That's still a little makes me a bit nervous still. So.
Okay. So do you want to do this eventually full time? I mean, is this something you can see yourself doing? Or do you think it's always going to be something you do in addition to your
career?
I
think I pretty much see it always as being as a pastime. The photography that I'm the most drawn to still is still the landscape and the night photography and that kind of stuff. And making a living in fine art photography is not an easy task.
No.
So I don't necessarily see that as a means to make a living any day soon. I guess if I could, that would be great, but
is your house filled with your own photography?
There's some of my own photography in the house, not a lot.
Really?
I'm very drawn to art in general, so we like to buy other people's art. So I mean, I have a couple pieces on the wall, but most of the stuff on our walls is other people's photographs and art and stuff.
Do you have a particular person that someone that you really enjoy? Someone's work that you really enjoy and will hang in your own house? Anybody?
Yeah, I mean, the only artist that I have two pieces hanging from is somebody that, lucky, I call a friend now. His name is Matt Hill, who's one of the people who taught night photography to me.
Okay.
So he's the only person I think he's the only person I have two pieces of on the wall. So so one is actually a photograph he took of Bannerman's, and one is a photograph of a series that he calls Night Paper. And he's also, on top of being a photographer and a million other things that he does as well, he's a cut paper artist. And he cuts these paper outfits for people, made specifically for a single person, and measurements and dresses them up in the paper and photographs them at night, most of the time in New York City or other special locations.
Okay.
So, and with long exposures and multiple lights and all kinds of crazy stuff going on.
And it just intrigues you.
And it's so interesting.
Yeah.
And I think it's that mix of that photography obviously speaks to me quite a bit, but then just that he's added this element with this cut paper and this outfits and these just crazy shapes that it gets.
Okay, cool.
It's very, very unusual stuff. I've never seen anybody do anything quite like it, so it's very, very appealing.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so what I usually ask people when they come to visit me is if you had to give some advice to someone who wanted to get involved, and where do you start? How do you just go pick up a camera? What direction would you push somebody in?
I mean, I definitely think a lot of it comes from doing it. So, I mean, the more you do it, the better you're going to get. I think it does help to have some base knowledge of what some
So a
basic
class,
principles.
maybe a class, not a
Yeah,
bad
I
idea.
mean, it could be a basic class. It could be, you know, some online reading. It could be taking a book out from the library. But something to try to get some of those underlying principles. The interesting thing for me about photography is that it's this blend of art and science. And the science stuff can be really confusing at first, and I still get lost in it sometimes. But understanding that relationship that you have between a shutter speed and an ISO and an aperture, and really understanding what those three things do and how it makes a photograph different is really important.
Okay.
And
So
I think
baseline education.
yeah, I think that can be really useful. Things like composition, I actually teach some classes, and some of it is on composition. There are some general principles about artistic composition, which applies to all kinds of art, not necessarily just photography. So yeah, so when it comes to composition, I definitely think it does help to have some guidance and to understand some of those principles. We like to talk about rules of composition, and then the first thing, like especially when I'm teaching, say, okay, I'm going to tell you about the rule of
And then I want to tell you
thirds,
how to break them.
and I'm going to say the first thing you want to do is break the rule of thirds, probably.
Okay.
You know, it's kind of some guidelines, and I think understanding those principles so that when you do break them, you understand what that's doing and how that's changing a viewer's perspective on something can be really important.
Cool.
Teaching composition is, teaching the rules kind of hard. Teaching, I think, the ways to break it and how, whether it works photographically or artistically or not, is a harder thing, I think, to teach, at least for me. Maybe there's other people that teach it better. I'm sure there is.
Well, what I will say to you is that I'd love to hear more.
Yeah.
I'd love to see more.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll be doing some more stuff in some classes.
Yes.
Again, you said through Frogs you give some classes, so
Yes.
people can find you there.
Yes, and then I teach through a company called Digital Photo Academy
Okay.
throughout the Hudson Valley.
Perfect. All right. Well, if anybody's interested, they can reach out to you. We'll put up some web addresses. And thank you for joining me today. And thank you all. And we will see you again soon.